Max's paws clicked softly on the cold airport floor as he walked beside Officer Jane. This was his first day at the international terminal, and everything felt new. The sounds, the smells, the rush of travelers. Max wasn't just any dog. He was a customs dog, trained to find things no one else could. But today everything felt different. There was a nervous energy in the air, like something was waiting just out of sight. Jane crouched down to Max's level and whispered, "Ready, boy? This is your big moment." Max wagged his tail, his eyes shining with excitement. He trusted Jane completely. She was more than his handler. She was his partner. Their first few hours passed quickly. Max sniffed luggage, passengers, even the ground around the checkpoints. Every new scent told a story. Some smelled like fresh coffee, others like tired travelers who hadn't slept. Max's nose twitched as he worked, his body tense but focused. He loved this job, loved being the one who could make a difference. Jane smiled, watching him. "Good boy, Max. Keep it up." The passengers barely noticed him, but Jane knew the power behind those soft eyes and twitching nose. But then, something shifted. Max suddenly stopped. His ears perked and his body stiffened. Jane noticed the change immediately. "What is it, Max?" she asked quietly, following his gaze. Max stared at a man standing a few feet away. The man's face was calm, but Jane could see the nervous tapping of his foot. Max's nose twitched rapidly as he sniffed the air. The man's bag gave off a strange scent, one Max had never smelled before. Jane's heart quickened. "Max, show me." Slowly, Max moved closer to the man, his tail low but alert. The man's eyes flicked nervously to Max, then away. Jane's gut told her something wasn't right. "Sir, can you please step aside for a moment?" Jane's voice was firm but polite. The man hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Max circled the bag, his nose pressed against it. Jane saw the faintest flicker of sweat on the man's forehead. "Max is alerting me," Jane said into her radio. "Requesting backup at checkpoint 3. The man's face tightened, his calm slipping away. "What's going on?" a nearby officer asked, approaching fast. Jane looked down at Max, pride and worry mixing in her chest. "I think Max just found something important." Max's eyes met Jane's, steady and strong. This was more than a job now. It was a test, and Max was ready. The airport buzzed around them, unaware of the quiet hero standing tall. Max's first flight had just begun. Max stayed close to Jane as they moved through the crowd. The airport was busy, but Max's nose pulled him toward one man. The man was sweating lightly and kept glancing around like he was afraid someone was watching him. His bag smelled different, faint but strange, like something hidden underneath all the normal scents. Jane noticed Max's behavior right away. "Max, what is it?" she whispered, her voice steady but tense. Max stopped suddenly, his body stiffened, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Jane's heart skipped a beat. This was the kind of alert that demanded attention. The man shuffled nervously, adjusting his bag as if trying to hide it better. Jane stepped closer, her voice firm but calm. "Sir, may I ask you to come with me for a quick check?" The man hesitated, eyes darting around. "Is there a problem?" he asked, voice shaky. Jane shook her head, signaling the nearby officer. "Just a routine check, sir. Please follow me." Max stayed right by Jane's side, his nose twitching as he focused on the bag. The man's calm disappeared, replaced by tightness around his mouth and quick breaths. "You don't have to do this," he said under his breath. Jane looked at Max, waiting for his signal. Max pressed his nose against the bag and growled softly again. Jane nodded and called for backup. "Max has detected something unusual. We need a full search here." The man's face paled, his hands trembling. "Look, I don't know what you think you're finding, but this is just personal stuff," he stammered. Jane wasn't convinced. "We'll know soon enough." As the officers carefully opened the bag, Max watched closely. Inside there were packages wrapped tightly in layers of plastic and tape. The smell was faint but unmistakable now. Something illegal, Jane felt a chill run down her spine. "Max, good job," she said quietly, placing a hand on his head. "You found something dangerous." The man's eyes locked on Max, fear clear in them. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he whispered. Jane kept her voice soft but firm. "You'll have a chance to explain everything. But right now, this is serious." Max's ears twitched, sensing the tension growing. This was just the beginning. Something dark was hiding behind this innocent face, and Max was the only one who could bring it to light. The airport, with all its noise and chaos, held a secret, and Max was ready to uncover it. The officers carefully peeled back the layers of the man's bag. Max stood close, his nose twitching as the strange scent grew stronger. Jane's eyes never left the packages wrapped tightly in plastic and tape. Something wasn't right. The air felt heavy with tension. "Sir," Jane said firmly. "Can you explain what this is?" The man's eyes darted around nervously. "It's just some personal items. Nothing illegal," he insisted, his voice shaky but trying to sound confident. But the officers weren't convinced. One of them pulled out a small device to scan the packages. "We're going to need to open these carefully," he said. Max watched, alert and ready. Jane could see the worry in his eyes. He knew this was serious. "Max has never been wrong before," she whispered softly. The man suddenly grew defensive. "Look, you're making a big deal out of nothing. I've got a flight to catch. Just let me go." His hands trembled as he tried to grab his bag back. Jane stepped in front of him. "No, sir. You need to cooperate. What's inside those packages?" He swallowed hard. I don't want to get in trouble. Please just let me pass." Jane's voice was steady but kind. "The truth will come out, but we need to know what you're carrying." Max's ears twitched. He could sense the man's fear, not just for himself, but something darker hidden beneath it. Jane's heart pounded as the officers carefully unwrapped one of the packages. Inside, there was a powdery substance, white and fine. "Drugs," one officer said grimly. Jane looked down at Max. "You were right all along, boy. This is serious." Suddenly, Jane's mind raced. If this was just one bag, how many more were hidden? How deep did this go? Max was more than a dog. He was a lifeline in this dangerous world. But the danger was real, and Jane worried for him. "Max, stay close," she whispered, touching his fur. This could get worse. The man's eyes darkened with anger and fear. "You don't understand what you're messing with," he said quietly. Jane narrowed her eyes. "Try me." As more officers arrived, Jane could see the man's silence growing. Max's alertness didn't fade for a second. He was ready to face whatever came next. Jane knew the risk. This was more than a routine check. It was the start of something dangerous, something that could put Max in harm's way. But Max didn't back down. His courage shone through, even when the tension thickened. Jane held his leash tightly. "We're in this together." The airport buzzed on around them, unaware of the dark secret they had just uncovered. Max was more than a customs dog now. He was a beacon of hope in a place where trust was fragile and danger hid in shadows. The road ahead was uncertain, but Max was ready to walk it no matter the cost. The moment the smuggler's bag was found, whispers started to spread fast. The airport buzzed with tension, and Max could feel it too. Jane's phone wouldn't stop ringing, and her superiors were demanding answers. "Jane, this could be bigger than we thought," one officer said, leaning close during a briefing. "A smuggling ring right under our noses. We need to move fast." Jane nodded, but her eyes were on Max. "We've got to be careful, Max," she said softly, stroking his ears. "This isn't just a simple case anymore. There are people who want to stay hidden, and they won't stop." Max's sharp nose picked up faint traces everywhere, scents that didn't belong, hidden in plain sight. Every time they moved through the terminal, Max's body tensed, alert to danger. Jane could see it in him. "I know, boy. We're in this together." Late one night, as the airport grew quiet, Jane sat with Max in a small office. "They're watching us," she whispered. "I'm worried they might try to scare you off." Max looked up, eyes calm but steady. He trusted Jane, and she was his anchor. The threats were no longer just rumors. Anonymous calls came in warning Jane to back off. "You need to let this go," a voice hissed through the phone one night. Jane's hands shook, but she didn't respond. She couldn't. Not when Max was counting on her. During their patrols, Max caught glimpses of suspicious activity, hurried meetings, whispered conversations. Jane followed his lead, pushing through the fear. "Stay close, Max. We'll get through this." One afternoon, Jane's supervisor pulled her aside. "This is high risk now. Are you sure you want to keep Max in the middle of this?" he asked sharply. Jane didn't hesitate. "Max is the best partner I have. He's my eyes and ears. Without him, we have no chance." The bond between them grew stronger, forged in quiet moments and shared danger. When Max was tired, Jane carried him through. When Jane doubted, Max gave her courage. In the shadows of the airport, dangers loomed closer. Jane knew the smuggling ring wouldn't give up easily, but she also knew Max's nose would never let them slip away. "Whatever comes next, Max, we face it together," Jane promised, her voice firm. Max wagged his tail slightly, ready for whatever the night would bring. The quiet before the storm settled in, but the silent partnership between dog and handler was stronger than ever. And in a world full of hidden threats, their trust was the only light they could count on. The threat started, arriving at Jane's phone late at night, messages full of warnings and danger telling her to stop. But Jane didn't back down. She knew Max was counting on her. "Max, listen," she said softly one evening as they walked the quiet terminal. "They're trying to scare us, but we can't let them win." Max looked up at her, eyes steady and full of trust. His loyalty never wavered, even when the world around them grew darker. Soon, the smuggling ring got clever. They began leaving false scents, hoping to confuse Max. Jane watched as Max sniffed bags that seemed suspicious but turned out to be empty. "Ignore it, boy," Jane whispered. "They're trying to trick you." It was like a game to them, but to Jane and Max, it was a battle for truth. The airport felt less safe now. Every shadow seemed to hold danger, every passenger a possible threat. One afternoon, Jane shared her fears out loud, hoping to stay strong. "Max, we have to stay strong. They can't win." Max responded, with a quiet bark as if promising, "I'm right here." Despite the distractions, Max's focus never faded. His sharp nose and steady heart guided Jane through the chaos. They faced unseen enemies who worked in silence, but their bond was louder than any threat. Jane tightened Max's leash as they moved through crowded halls. "We've come too far to stop now." A sudden alarm blared, and officers rushed past. Jane and Max stayed calm, trusting each other completely. In the middle of all the noise and fear, Max was a constant, steady, brave, and unbreakable. "You're more than just a dog," Jane said softly, scratching behind his ears. "You're my hero." Max wagged his tail, ready for whatever came next. The smuggling ring might be strong, but Jane and Max were stronger. Together, they stood against the shadows, their courage lighting the darkest corners of the airport. And no matter what tricks the enemy played, Max's loyalty shone like a beacon, guiding them forward through the storm. Jane's hands trembled, slightly as she adjusted Max's harness. The night had been long, their steps heavier with exhaustion, but their mission was far from over. "Tonight, Max, we find the leader," Jane whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. Max's eyes met hers, calm, focused, ready. The undercover operation was risky. Jane knew it could change everything, or end badly. Max led the way through the dimly lit corridors of the airport's cargo area. The air smelled of oil and metal, but Max's nose was trained to detect what was hidden. Jane held her breath as he sniffed near a locked crate. "Any sign, Max?" she asked softly. Max's tail twitched. Then he pressed his nose against a small seam. Jane's heart pounded. "Good boy, let's see what's inside." They found hidden compartments inside the crate, cleverly disguised. Max's nose confirmed the presence of illegal substances. Jane radioed quietly. "We've got confirmation." Moving in. Suddenly, voices echoed nearby. Jane froze, pulling Max close. "Stay calm, boy. We can't blow this now." The smugglers appeared, tense and alert. Jane's heart raced as they confronted the men. "What are you doing here?" one demanded sharply. Jane forced a calm tone. "Routine inspection, nothing to worry about." Max stood firm, alert but silent, eyes never leaving the smugglers. One man sneered, "You won't find anything." Jane felt the weight of the moment. Max was her shield and her strength, but this was their toughest test. The men began opening crates, unaware of the police backup waiting nearby. Suddenly, a sharp sound. A struggle. Jane pulled Max close, whispering, "We're almost there. Hold on." Max barked softly, warning of approaching danger. Jane's hands gripped his harness tighter. They waited, hearts pounding. The leader stepped forward, cold, dangerous. "You're in over your head," he said, eyes locked on Jane. Jane held her ground. "Justice is coming, you can't hide." Max's nose twitched, picking up every scent, every danger. Jane felt tears prick her eyes, the exhaustion, the fear, the hope all mixing inside her. "Max, we're almost done. Stay with me." The backup moved in. Arrests followed. Jane knelt beside Max, hugging him tightly. "We did it, boy. You were amazing." Max licked her face gently, tired but proud. The emotional toll was heavy. Jane whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you." Max's loyal eyes said it all. In that moment, they weren't just handler and dog. They were family, bound by courage and love. As the night settled, Jane and Max knew the fight wasn't over. But for now, they had won a battle that few believed possible. Their bond had carried them through the breaking point, stronger, unbreakable. Jane sat back, staring at the files spread across the table. The long nights of chasing leads were finally paying off. But what she found next made her gasp. "This is bigger than we thought," she whispered, voice shaking. Max lay beside her, eyes sharp and steady, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Jane flipped through documents revealing a web far darker than simple smuggling. It wasn't just drugs or goods. This ring was tied to something far more sinister. "The packages we found, they're linked to human trafficking," Jane said, voice barely steady. "They've been using the airport to move people illegally, hidden in plain sight." Max shifted closer, his body tense. Jane could almost feel his understanding. This was no ordinary case, and it was a fight for lives. "Max, this isn't just about catching criminals anymore," Jane said, reaching down to rub his ears. "We're trying to save people." The news hit hard. Jane's hands trembled as she read witness statements and secret records. Faces of victims stared back, silent and desperate. She swallowed hard. "We have to act fast." Max stood, ears perked, ready. His courage was a beacon in the darkness. Jane's heart swelled, with pride and fear. "We can't let them win," she said firmly. The airport now felt different, heavier, more dangerous. But Jane and Max pushed on, guided by the truth. Every sniff Max took, every alert, brought them closer to unraveling the full scope. One evening, as they walked the terminal, Jane spoke softly. "Max, this fight is bigger than us, but we have to keep going." Max responded with a quiet bark, steady and sure. Jane's phone buzzed. More intel arrived, confirming the depth of the operation. "They're ruthless," she murmured. "But, Max, we have something they don't. Loyalty and truth." Her thoughts raced. How many innocent people had suffered? How many more were at risk? The weight was heavy, but Max's steady presence gave her strength. "We're not just stopping smugglers," Jane said. "We're stopping a nightmare." Max leaned into her touch, a silent promise. Together they would face the darkness. The shocking truth was out now. But with Max's relentless courage leading the way, justice was no longer just a hope. It was within reach. Jane's heart pounded as she tightened Max's leash. This is it, Max. We end this tonight. Max's eyes locked on hers, steady and fearless. They were ready for the chase. The airport was packed with travelers, but Jane and Max moved fast, slipping through crowds unnoticed. Every second counted. Max's nose led them through a maze of terminals, his focus unbreakable despite the chaos. Suddenly, Jane spotted movement. A shadow slipping toward a hidden service door. "There!" she whispered. Max charged forward, barking sharply. The smugglers knew they were coming, but Max's speed was faster. Jane followed close behind, her breath coming in quick gasps. They burst through the door into a narrow tunnel, dimly lit by flickering lights. The air was thick and heavy. "Stay close, Max," Jane urged. Max sniffed the air, then sprinted ahead. Jane's radio crackled with voices from backup teams closing in. "You're doing great, Max," she said, pride swelling in her chest. The smugglers turned corners, desperate to escape. Jane's legs burned, but she kept pace, eyes never leaving Max. His instincts were their guide through the dark tunnels. Suddenly, Max stopped, nose to the ground, growling low. Jane felt a rush of adrenaline. "They're close," she said. From the shadows, a man lunged toward Jane, but Max was faster. He leapt, biting the attacker's arm, forcing him to release Jane. "Good boy, Max," Jane shouted, catching her breath. Backup arrived, just in time to cuff the smugglers. Jane knelt beside Max, relief washing over her. "You saved me again." Max wagged his tail, tired but proud. His bravery had stopped the dangerous men. As officers led the suspects away, Jane looked at Max and whispered, "We did it, boy. Thanks. To you." Max nuzzled her hand, loyal and loving as ever. The chase was over, but Jane knew the fight against darkness was never truly done. Still, with Max by her side, hope was stronger than fear. Together, they had raced through shadows and danger to bring justice. Max's courage had been their greatest weapon, and Jane's heart swelled knowing they faced the future as a team. No matter what came next, they were ready. The day the smuggling ring was finally exposed felt like a weight lifting off the airport. Max sat quietly beside Jane as officers led the last suspects away in handcuffs. The tension that had haunted the terminal was gone, replaced by relief and hope. Jane looked down at Max and smiled. "We did it, boy. Thanks to you." Max wagged his tail, eyes shining with pride, but Jane was quick to remind everyone who praised him. "It was teamwork that saved the day," she said firmly. "Max's nose is incredible, but none of this would have been possible without every single person working together." The media buzzed, calling Max a hero. Passengers stopped to thank Jane and Max, their faces filled with gratitude. But for Jane, the most important thing was the healing that had begun. She visited a shelter where some of the victims found safety. "You saved lives, Max," Jane whispered softly as he rested his head on her lap. "This is what it's all about." Max's loyalty never wavered, even after long days and sleepless nights. Jane saw the tiredness in his eyes, but also the unbreakable spirit. "We're stronger together," she said. The bond between dog and handler had deepened beyond words. They had faced danger, fear, and darkness, and come through it united. Jane knew Max wasn't just a partner. He was family. At the airport, things slowly returned to normal, but the memory of what they had stopped remained. Max's work had saved countless lives and brought justice to those who thought they could hide in shadows. Jane took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all. "This isn't just the end," she said quietly. "It's a new beginning." Max looked up, his eyes full of hope and trust. Together they had made a difference that would echo far beyond the airport walls. And in that moment, surrounded by a world healing from pain, Jane and Max knew their story was far from over. They were ready for whatever came next, side by side, hearts forever linked by courage and love. Jane sat quietly in the empty terminal, Max resting his head on her lap. The chaos was over, but the memories lingered. "We made it, Max," she said softly, her voice full of both relief and pride. Max looked up, eyes calm but full of the same unspoken bond they shared through every challenge. Their journey hadn't been easy. From the first sniff of danger to the final arrest, Max's courage had been the heart of the mission. Jane thought about all the nights they'd spent chasing shadows, the fear they faced and the hope that kept them going. People don't always see the heroes behind the scenes, Jane said, stroking Max's fur gently. But you've changed. So many lives, boy. Max wagged his tail slowly like he understood. Jane smiled, thinking of how many new customs dog teams had started training inspired by Max's story. You're not just a dog, she whispered. You're a legend. The airport had started to heal just like them. Passengers moved with less fear, and the staff worked with a renewed sense of safety. Jane knew the fight against darkness never truly ended, but this chapter had closed with hope. As Jane looked out at the busy terminal, she imagined a future filled with promise. We'll face whatever comes next, she said. Together. Max rested against her, tired but ready. He was more than a partner. He was family, and their bond was unbreakable. Thank you, Max, Jane said, her voice catching, for being my eyes, my heart, and my courage. In the quiet moments that followed, Jane reflected on all the silent heroes, the dogs and handlers who worked without fanfare, protecting countless lives every day. Max let out a soft sigh, a sign of trust and comfort. Jane knew their story was just one among many, but it carried a message. Bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and found in the eyes of a loyal dog. As the sun set over the airport, Jane hugged Max tightly. Here's to new beginnings, she said, hope shining in her eyes. Max licked her hand, ready to face the future side by side. And so, their journey ended with gratitude, healing, and the promise that the silent heroes among us will always keep watch, no matter what comes next.